Hi friends, it's Brittany at Ink and Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. Sometimes we are at our most creative when we aren't overwhelmed by supplies. One of my favorite pieces of ephemera to make are watercolor paintings with doodles over top. Painting can be really intimidating sometimes, but even I can make some blobs on paper and doodle over top of them. Sometimes I do this directly on a journal page, but usually I like to do this on either watercolor paper or thicker cardstock and then fussy cut them out and use them as a focal point in a project. First, I want to start by showing you some of the projects that I like to incorporate my watercolor doodles into. You can truly do anything with these, just some easy ideas. Consider using them in belly bands, page trim, envelope closures by putting a brad through them, incorporating them into journal cards, specimen cards. The sky is the limit. Many of these projects are self-explanatory. One of the first ones I'm showing you here is a decorated envelope. I just doodled over some watercolor painted flowers and some paper buttons and decorated the envelope with it. Next, you'll see some journal toppers with paper buttons at the top of them, and followed by that, a page with paper buttons at the top using it as paper trim, I guess you would call it. A lot of the layouts here I'm showing you are bright and full of floral elements. That's just because these are my spring and summer journals I'm primarily showing you. However, you can do the same thing with pumpkins, mushrooms, spooky things, dark, mystique. It doesn't have to be so bright and cheery. I know this video is coming out right around fall time, probably before Halloween. So just consider the way you can apply these same techniques and concepts to do similar projects just with different themes. Here I've used one of those mushrooms as a tuck spot. Next you'll see some owls and some mushrooms, a belly band I've created using one of the watercolor mushroom doodles as a focal point, and a postcard underneath tucked into that. It was decoupaged with some sewing paper or sewing pattern, and I put a watercolor flower doodle on top of that and just dolled it up a little bit. So let's get started. So I'm going to try and take this project by project, meaning we're going to make several different types of illustrations here. We will be doing some floral circles, some flowers. We could do some hedgehogs, some jellyfish, owls, birds. Maybe we'll even sneak some narwhals in here. So when I say I will try and keep the projects separate, I mean I will try and show you, for example, I'm working on flower circles. I will try and keep the video so that we paint the flower circles and then we doodle over them to create a finished product, as opposed to painting the front half of the video and doodling the last half. Because of the speed of the paint drying, I can't promise that will always happen, but that is my intention for this video. I don't want you guys to have to skip all over the video if there's one specific thing that you're interested in, so I hope this makes sense. But as many of you probably know, organization is not necessarily my strong suit, and when I get on a tangent or find something that I like doing, I usually can't stop, so we will at least try and keep the chaos controlled. So if I haven't already mentioned, I'm definitely no painter. I am absolutely no expert at watercolors, and that in itself is why I enjoy this project so much. I find that when I try and paint detailed things, landscapes, I don't know, it never turns out the way that I want it to. I'm working on my watercolor skills, but they just are not there. But there's something very simplistic about these watercolor doodles. Even though they look kind of whimsical and childlike, that's sort of the magic of them. That is what gives them their charm, and that's why I find these so not intimidating at all and very relaxing to do. Hopefully now that I've started doodling, you can kind of see what I mean by floral circles, what my intent for the project is. I find that with these watercolor doodles, especially with these floral circles, I mean, really, how much easier can you get? But I think the way to really make them look the best is to really get a lot of water on your brush and just give them dimension by allowing the colors to bleed into each other. So when I'm doing these floral circles and a lot of the watercolor doodles that involve blobs, I do a lot of wet on wet watercolor painting. The best thing about this project is you don't need precision. You'll see I'm just doodling as I go. Sometimes when I don't know what to create with these, I'll look and see where the blob of paint takes me. Sometimes you'll just put some blobs of paint down just without much care thought on the paper, and then as you pick up your pen and start to doodle, it starts to look like something and kind of leads you in the right direction. Maybe I'm just crazy. I bet you a lot of you know what I'm talking about. Dots, squares, circles, hearts, they're all your friends. Squiggly lines if you don't know where else to go. And then look, you'll end up with a page that looks like this. Okay, but those were floral circles. I mean, I can't paint. Like, what else could I possibly do? How about some glass mason jars? Yep, these are so cute. I was thinking about making some of these to put in a recipe journal. Or I don't know, you could put them in any journal. I think they're just adorable, kind of country style, homesy mason jars. So very easy. You just want to paint the sides, the bottom. What I've noticed is these look better. One, if you leave definitely some white space in the middle, it makes them look more like jars. Don't worry about the lid. We'll be adding that later. I guess you could use several colors, but I've noticed the jars I think look best if you only use a couple of different colors. In addition to leaving some white space, especially in the middle, I think they look best when there are several different shades of one or two watercolors. So whether you want to dilute that down on the paper or on a palette, it's up to you. But I like to, for example, the dark red, I kind of watered it down and added a lot of water to drag that pigment over and get some lighter shades going on there. I think it just gives them dimension, and that's what you want because they're obviously jars. Don't be afraid to decorate the jars. You can see I have used several different jars, and so I've given them several different lids. You can make it look like there's something hanging over from the lid. You could write the name of your favorite brand of mason jar on the front. One of these that it was meant to look like the olive oil bottle, I've gone in with a white acrylic paint pen to just give, it almost looks like a lattice, like architectural front there, illustration on the front, but really just, I don't know, doodle to your heart's content. All right, on to leaves. So same concept as the floral circles, a lot of just loose watercolor painting. There is no rhyme or reason to these. Don't be stressed. Leaves can look a million different ways. As you can see here, I have taken a lot of liberties with what shapes of leaves should look like, and I had a lot of fun with it. The further you go with these, you'll understand. Don't be down on yourself if you don't like how they look initially. You will understand once they dry and you go into doodle over them, you'll really see them kind of come to life. When I initially started painting the leaves, I was doing wet on wet to get that nice pigment in the middle of the leaf to spread, and then I was waiting for them to dry to then go back in with more paint to really define the center stem of the leaf, you know, the line that runs through the middle of the leaf and kind of branches off. Then I realized just get some pigment in the middle of the leaf while it's wet, let it dry, and then just draw in the stem with the with your pen. I like the way that it looked more anyways that way, so you don't necessarily have to wait for these to dry and then do the stem with the paint and then go back in and doodle, but you know, obviously whatever you're feeling, it's totally up to you. Okay, so let's skip ahead to one of my favorites, owls and birds. These are so much fun. Don't worry if, just like me, you cannot paint. All you have to do is make a blob and extend it upward to create a smaller blob. So you have a larger blob, a smaller blob, also known as the head, and that's the hardest part, I promise. Sorry, I'm a little out of frame. As you can see for the first one, I extended that wet paint to create a little tail. Don't worry about details. That is what the doodling is for. Just take a light brush and create some texture there for the tail feather. Maybe draw some lines up and some dots to create like a crown feather, or you can add those details in later when we're doodling, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Sometimes extending the paint along to give it a little bit more color, and then adding the doodles and any kind of details over top later works really well too. I also really like wet on wet painting for this, especially starting with your lighter color and then coming in with a really wet brush to add darker colors and just kind of let them bleed. I think especially makes for some very nice feathers later on. I think based on the shape, I've chosen the white bird in the top left area is going to be a bird, whereas the other little blobs on the page I made, I think will probably make better owls, and you'll see why in just a little bit. You can make little darker lines along the body, just like I have, to sort of start to form some wings. You don't have to do this though. If you would prefer, we can wait until we get out our pen and start doodling and draw them on. In addition to blobbing some water down and just allowing some different colors to bleed into it, as you saw with that little orange owl, I took a clean wet brush and just kind of scratched at the painting a little bit, and that also will give it dimension. I know there is a technical term for this for you watercolor geeks who actually know what you're talking about. Do you mind dropping that down in the comments below? Thank you so much. So you'll notice that for the owls, I'm using a couple of different kinds of pens. Obviously the black pen, but I'm also using some metallic pens that I have that work really well, as well as some paint markers to draw the owl mask, the white, silver, gold portion, whatever color you want to use for the eyes. And hopefully you can see that kind of developing. I am skipping around a little bit because I need for that metallic or the white paint that I used, I need that to dry before I can draw on the eyes. The owls are really cool, and one of my favorite parts to add are the eyes. You can create so many expressions just by drawing eyes, whether you draw them googly or have several different circles and use lines to kind of merge them together, or whether I think I even drew glasses on one of my owls. So that's one of my favorite parts to draw, and I think it's what also gives them the most character. You can give them all different kinds of wings, draw little half circles over the body, or you can extend them out like I did for the pink owl. The beak is simply an upside down triangle. It's as easy as it gets. You can give them different little embellishments like some ears, or you could draw some butterflies around them. You don't have to keep it confined to the owl itself. You could make a whole scene. I love giving my owls funny little ears, and don't forget the feet. You can just draw little squiggles under the owl, or you can draw full-on legs, whatever you prefer. So now the bird is the odd man out on the page. I'm not even sure if I show you guys doodling over the bird. It's okay, we'll do another page of dedicated birds if you're interested in that. I think I started with the bird, and as much as I really like him, I just decided I would rather paint owls instead. Here I'm just trying to give the owl a fancy mask. It almost looks like cat eye glasses, but I think it's adorable. Notice the different doodling I've put over the owl's bodies to give them a little dimension and texture. They are just circles or dashes or little arrow signs like the purple one to the right at the bottom. This right here is just a whole another page of doodled birds and owls to give you some ideas and inspiration. Okay, now on to one of my absolute favorite things to paint, mushrooms. Try not to be distracted by the little circle-y things next to the mushroom. Those are going to be paper buttons. I'm just waiting for them to dry. So on to the mushrooms. So the best thing to do, I think, or the way I like to do this, is to paint the stem first. I typically like to stick to earthy colors, but heck, you do whatever you want. The one thing I will say is that I think the stems look really good when you have bled some colors into them to kind of merge the mushroom and the stem. So I do like to stick to, in general, lighter colors for the stem, but again, it's a matter of personal preference. I'm going to show you how to paint several different types and shapes of mushrooms. The first mushroom, I'm just starting with the stem, and you're going to see once I draw the stem and make a sort of circular bulb, I'm going to take a line of a paint of a different color and just make a sort of sphere, I guess you would call, from one end of the stem at the top to the next. And this is going to be your mushroom cap. Next, I'm just finishing the mushroom cap by filling it in. You, again, to add dimension, you want to add a little bit of water to your brush and fill that pink out so that there are some lighter areas and some darker areas. And don't be afraid to keep some areas of white space. And you can actually use this to create more interest when you're doing your doodles. Imagine some circles or squiggles along the mushroom that are purely white. You could also mimic this with a white paint marker, but we'll get to that later. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess my point is that don't be afraid to add some white space or keep some lighter areas. I think it will actually look spectacular when we are doing our doodles later. Okay, on to the next mushroom. This is one of the easier mushrooms to paint. We are simply making a little like rainbow and drawing a line underneath, connecting the areas, and using the tip of our paintbrush to drag down some of that wetter paint to almost give it like a little shade, imagine like you're drawing down a curtain. If you want to use another brush for this to give it a little bit more texture, that works too. See, I'm just using my brush to bring that paint down, letting it bleed into the stem a little bit. And again, for this mushroom, I chose a very, very, very just simple stem. Just took one of my fat brushes and drew down some kind of tan paint, and I am bleeding a couple other shades of blue into the mushroom cap, and I think this looks spectacular. For our next mushroom, we're going to do a very similar technique. It's going to look very similar. I'm basically drawing the same shape, except for I'm using different colors, letting some of the colors bleed in, taking a clean brush at one point and just kind of scooping some of that paint up, like scratching it off the surface like I was before. And I'm going in with that green to just just extend that little mushroom shade, that cap down a little bit to give it some texture. The areas where I feel like there's too much paint concentrated in one area, I'm almost trying to like lift it back up with my paintbrush. And I went in with a really wet brush to draw the stem, and I absolutely am in love with what happened when I just let the tan stem bleed into the mushroom cap. It looked magical, and I was so happy. It kept that same effect as after it dried. And so I started kind of doing this with the rest of the mushrooms, just going in with really wet brush when I was drawing the stem, and just let that tan seep into the mushroom cap. It like gave it so much more dimension and created these swirls that I don't think I could have created if I would have tried myself. If you feel kind of lost just because there's so many different kinds of mushrooms, just Google some, and even Google sort of Google Mushrooms Illustrated to give you a more like cartoony version, and I think that will inspire you. That's what I usually do when I want to draw something and can't think of how to draw it. Here I'm just creating a tri mushroom. They're all attached at the stem, and I thought it looks a little weird, so I just added a little grass down there at the bottom to kind of join them together. And once I do that, I just bleed in a little bit of blue into each of the mushroom caps, and I love the way this looks. We will be doodling over these, of course, so you don't have to add a whole ton of a detail, but I do like adding some swirls and stripes and stuff to the mushroom caps with paint. We'll, of course, build on this with our pen after the paint dries. Now, here are some ideas for doodles that I like to make over the mushrooms. I like to start by outlining the mushroom itself. It just gives great contrast. Oftentimes, I'll add some extra little designs along the stem, and then you'll see me come in and oftentimes what I'll do is to make them more dimensional is to draw some lines from the stem itself to the mushroom cap, and that'll really bring the mushrooms to life. Sometimes I'll add some circles at the end of those lines that I create, and that also I think really gives this dimension. Here I'm just showing you extra special little designs and things you can do to elevate your mushrooms. I do like adding more details to the mushroom caps, as you'll see me do here. I'm doing some shading, trying to give them a little bit more dimension, maybe adding some squiggles and designs to the mushroom caps. But the theme is just keeping it really, really simple. And I think when you see me fussy cut these out, you'll see how incredible they look, especially if you delve into maybe adding some different colors of paint markers, splotching some white on there. I'm telling you, these look incredible. More mushrooms, more ideas. As you can see, I'm just giving the stem some more detail, the cap some more detail. I fixed the lines in a way that I think that mushroom down there, the one with the orange and the black splotches on them, I love how that turned out. I used some different doodles where the cap meets the stem and extended the lines out from that little, I don't even know, that like puffed out piece. I think it made the mushroom so lifelike, and I can't wait to do these in the future. I'm definitely going to be adjusting the way that I create these stems. I was so excited. I also think that pink mushroom looked amazing with that metallic pen that I came in with. I got these off of AliExpress. I just type in metallic pens. I'm sure you can really get them anywhere. Same with the paint markers. the white paint marker that I used down at the very bottom on that red, I think made it look like that stereotypical classic fairy-like mushroom that I absolutely love. So while we're here, I have to show you this adorable narwhal I made. This was so easy. I simply just drew a circle with my paintbrush for the head and extended a couple of lines for the body, blended a little bit of paint to just give it a pattern, and then I drew a horn and gave it some fins and a really pretty kind of mermaid looking tail, and I do a similar sort of pattern for the narwhal above. So while we're on the sea theme, let's work on some jellyfish. My jellyfish I like to keep really simple. I either create the body of the jellyfish and then draw tentacles with the paint, or I'll create the body and then I'll just draw a blob underneath it to add color, and I won't do anything that looks like tentacles. I will wait until I'm ready to doodle over it and then create the tentacles from scratch. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. So for the doodle portion, usually I just go around the body of the jellyfish and then I will either create tentacles with squiggly lines, or maybe I will draw two lines and connect them to kind of create more of a tentacle, and then I'll draw little circles or half circles within them to make them look more lifelike. Sometimes I just keep it really whimsical and simple, and I will give them googly eyes and give them a smile and a full-on face, and sometimes I will create different sort of patterns on the body and not give them a face, if you know what I mean. There's really so many things that you can do with these guys. So these are probably some of the silliest and most whimsical jellyfish I've ever made, but I was thinking about putting some of these into one of my travel journals that I've created from one of my tropical vacations, or maybe I'll put it in my dive journal, something like that. While we're talking about cute creatures, I had to show you these cute little snails. Oh, and look at these little hedgehogs. All you're doing is taking your paintbrush and just drawing little lines in a circle pattern, leaving some white space, or alternatively, depending on the kind of hedgehog you want, maybe you're going to create that C shape and then kind of snake it back around. You'll see as I'm doodling which paint patterns allow you to create different faces of hedgehogs. I hope seeing the doodling their faces allows you to conceptualize better the pattern in which you're painting, but all you're doing is just painting out little lines in like a kind of like frantic pattern. There's really no, it's not rocket science. You're literally just tapping and drawing and extending the paint a little bit. Maybe bleed in some other colors. I think I bled in like a darker green with an olive green. In general, I kind of like to keep the hedgehogs a uniform color. Okay, so I'm sure you guys get the concept by now. This is the show and tell we've been waiting for. I did some of the painting and doodling off camera, so you may not recognize all of these images, but obviously you get the concept. You can do anything you want. You can paint anything you want. You can use this concept. These have become one of my favorite embellishments to put into my journals. In fact, I have a whole bag full of watercolor doodle ephemera. I love having these at the ready, and these are so much fun to mass make. I'm going to show you guys shortly what they look like when they are fussy cutted out, and I think they look even more spectacular. That's another reason why I like doing this on watercolor paper or thick cardstock and then cutting them out and putting them in the journals as opposed to doing them right on the page. You will see when I show you the fussy cutted images, I like leaving some white space around the image itself. I think first of all, it lends itself easier to fussy cut out. I hate fussy cutting. It makes it much faster of a process, but also the white contrast up against the black outline looks amazing. So I know I showed you guys a couple of birds on camera, but I also did some other birds off camera. There are so many different ways to draw them. You can see the one that I drew that was actually looks like it's in flight. That looks so cool. We didn't do these flowers together, these wispy, droopy flowers, though they're also one of my absolute favorite things to paint and doodle over. So I know we didn't do butterflies together, but you can see how they are done, and they're very, very easy. The leaves, I love these leaves. More birds. I was on a bird kick and a paper button kick. Those are at the bottom there. You can see how I decorated them. The thing that I forgot to mention is a lot of times you will end up with spaces in between your shapes, and it's kind of like a lot of dead and wasted space. That is the perfect time to doodle in some buttons. All you're doing is laying down a little bit of wet paint in a circular fashion, and I find that that is the best way to use up some of that dead space, so you're not wasting a whole lot of cardstock. Snails, so much fun. So many ways you can do those as well. I love drawing their little shells. I threw some turtles in there just because when I started drawing the snails, I ended up with some circles that I thought looked more like turtles, and so I just went with it. So do you see the bird with the glasses? So I think it's special little touches like that that make these so fantastic. Don't be afraid to add little details. Use your imagination, and you know, if you're stuck and you don't really like something, just keep going with it. You keep going with it. Layer on some paint. If you really decide you don't like it, then maybe wait for it to dry and then put a new layer of paint over it, almost like glazing. You'll never, I don't know, sometimes it'll end up looking totally different, but you'll end up with something that you're thrilled with. So don't give up on it. Just keep going. The mushrooms, I love those so much, and it's funny because I had so many mushrooms that I didn't like. You have to keep doing it and you get the hang of how to make the stem. So those are some of my earlier versions of mushrooms that I hated them. But I kept going with them. I doodled over them quite a bit to try and kind of fix the shape so it looked more 3D like I was intending, and it worked. So you get better with this as you go along, and they're meant to be whimsical. You know, don't take them so seriously. Just have fun. The whole point of this project was this is probably one of the most relaxing things you can do. You know, you need very few supplies and you can just use your imagination and run with it. And that's what I enjoy about this project so much. And I definitely had to show you the finished hedgehogs. Look at these cuties. And last but not least, I just had to do a little flip through of some of the images that I have fussy cutted out so you can see what they look like as standalones. So guys, I hope you enjoyed making this as much as I did. When I need a relaxing, satisfying project and I'm not in the mood to drag out a whole bunch of stuff, this is my go-to, and I bet now you can see why. These are so much fun, and you can easily mass make so many of them so quickly, and by the end of a few hours have so many adorable, different styled images to decorate your journals with. And most of all, remember, these are whimsical. No one expects them to be perfect. And in fact, it's the imperfection, the asymmetries, the blotches, and the smears that give them their charm. So guys, thank you so much for being here today. If you enjoyed this and you found value in this, please hit that like and subscribe button. And I can't wait to see you the next time.